As CEO and president of Mariner Wealth Advisors, Marty Bicknell drives the strategic direction of the firm. As a recognized leader in wealth management, he devises innovative solutions to help meet the needs of their clients. He has an extensive personal and professional experience with closely held family businesses and their unique complexities. He often mentors other successful entrepreneurs. Marty, along with 7 others, founded Mariner Wealth Advisors in 2006 with the goal of keeping the client at the center of all they do. He wanted to build a firm that could simplify their clients' lives by having the resources they needed under one roof. The day the door opened, Marty made the promise to put clients' interests before anything else, a promise he holds near and dear to this day. Marty, welcome to the DealQuest podcast.
Corey, thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so Marty, I'm so excited to talk to you. I mean, I've followed the evolution of Mariner for, pretty much this whole time in the industry. We've known each other for a long time. And you did so many great things even before you got into the M&A, side of things to grow Mariner. And I want to talk about all that but before we get there, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because my guess is the CEO of a wealth management firm wasn't it back then, but you tell me.
No, it wasn't. I didn't even know what an RIA was.
Right.
It's interesting. You said in the bio that, experience with closely held businesses. My father was a serial entrepreneur. He started at least 8 companies from scratch. One of them was the largest Pizza Hut franchise in the world. And so, as a kid watching him, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to, start companies from scratch and build them. And so, I didn't know exactly what that was going to be or where that was going to take me, but that's what I wanted to do. I was just watching my father.
I love that. It's so funny how we all get to entrepreneurship because I had just the opposite. Like nobody in my family was an entrepreneur and I had no models, but I sort of looked at the jobs my father had and he became successful over time, whatever. And I was sort of like, I don't think I want to do that. I want to do something else. So it's like it was the opposite for me as opposed to following in the footsteps. One other question looking back, what was your first deal of any type? It could be something small when you were younger, early in your career, any kind of thing that's a deal that comes to mind.
Corey, that's a great question and an interesting one. So, I've been asked a lot in panels and things like that about, the first RIA acquisition we've done and things like that. But, going even farther back, the first deal I ever did in my 20s, I bought a liquor store in a small town in Southeast Kansas. And, just thinking back, somebody in their 20s owning a liquor store is probably not the best advice in the world, but it was an interesting experience for me. Didn't make any money at it, but it was a great learning experience.
Wow. I'll ask one follow-up on that before we get really on topic, but yeah, what had you as 20-something years old, like buy a liquor store? And how did you even, listen, I guess, your dad was an entrepreneur, so you had that model, and like the local liquor authority approved you at 20-something? Weren't there some approvals required?
Yeah, no, I definitely got approved. The interesting thing, you mentioned it, but, my dad being an entrepreneur, I knew I wanted to try something like that. And I knew the people that were selling it and decided that it was an opportunity for me to, it's easy to say now, is an opportunity to get my feet wet in owning something. I didn't really know what I was thinking sitting here today, all this time later, but again, it was a great learning experience.
Love that. All right. So listen, let's hop into it. Let's talk about Mariner. It's interesting. We've had a variety and we'll have a couple more folks on this series. And the models are different. Even how they came to be in the industry or start the firm was different. And you have some these days that are, started as aggregators, right? That's the model that they're starting. You, on the other hand, back, I'm doing math now. What was it, 16, 17 years ago?
16. Yeah, 16.
Started a firm that was a RA firm, right? A wealth management firm. And you grew. I watched your growth for many, many years through more organic means and onboarding of advisors and not really doing deals. And then, we'll get to when you made the switch, but talk to us about those early days and that mentality and, and thinking and when you started up and how you grew even before you started doing a lot of acquisitions.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, the company was founded in May of 2006. And, I spent the first 16 years of my career at A.G. Edwards. So I was kind of on the other side of the fence, so to speak, in a wirehouse. And, that's the only thing I knew. I went to work there literally the day after I graduated college. And, I didn't know what an RIA was.
Right.
And, those individuals who might be listening that were at AG Edwards know this is like, it was an incredible firm with an incredible culture that went through changes. And those changes, impacted a lot of advisors. And so I started trying to figure out what my next was, and, was fortunate enough to bump into two individuals at Fidelity, and I didn't know what an RIA was.
Right.
And so once I learned, the fiduciary model, I knew it was the right thing for our clients and the rest of the team. And so I just jumped in.
Wow. Love it. And then, so for a while, I mean, like I said, you had significant growth before you started really an M&A program. Let's talk a little bit about how you did that before we jump into what's more the meat of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so we started the firm with a very simple philosophy that exists today. It's client first, associate second, shareholder last. And really thinking about the progression of that. And we wanted to do what was right for the client, to drive client outcomes, and entering the fiduciary world, the RIA space, and understanding the things that we could do for our clients. That was different than being on the wirehouse side of the world. We started an in-house tax practice almost day one. Yep. Started doing different things. We own our own insurance general agency. We did that really early on. Just different things that we could bring to the table that allowed us to do bigger and greater things for our clients. And as we get into it later, I'll kind of paint a picture of what all that looks like today. But back then, it was really getting one subject matter expert at a time on something that I knew the clients needed but didn't know how to deliver myself.
Yeah. And so in an industry where the studies show, certainly over the last number of years, that organic growth is actually a lot lower. We had a 10-year, 12-year run where the market was great, right? And as somebody on a panel I saw once said, that a bull market makes everybody look brilliant, right? But if you look at true organic growth, the average firm below the big, the big aggregators was growing at under 3%. A lot of the stats, Joe. But you had significant organic growth during that period of time before you moved more into the deal-driven side, right? And do you think what else was it beyond the expanding of the services that you were able to offer clients?
Yeah, so our organic growth, philosophy and process today is really a little bit different, and happy to discuss that when we get there. But back then, even as I was coming out of AG Edwards, I discovered the concept of separating business development from advice. And so if you think about the wirehouse world, you could have corner office guy could be the best business development professional there is, but maybe not the best advice giver. And then you'd look at some center offices or even some cubicles and see somebody that was really, really strong technically, but they weren't that proficient at convincing clients to come in. And so by really focusing on separating that and using people's unique abilities, we had people that's all day, all they focused on was how we bring in the next client. And that's really what propelled us back then.
Love it. And, I want to move to more of the present, but the reason I like to set that history is because for some folks, and, and I anecdotally know in the industry about you guys, is there are certainly advisors that are drawn to places where they did come up through as an RIA, had to deal with those organic growth and the decisions on expansion of services and all those kind of things, as opposed to starting off as let's say a PE funded data, right? So, I wanted people to get a sense of that, but let's bring it more up to date now. Or actually what I'd like to do is talk about, so you had a lot of success in this organic growth and the expansion of services and everything you did that you talked about now. But then there became a point where you decided, hey, I'm also going to go, obviously you continue to do that. You improved it. We're going to talk about ways you did that, but I also want to grow through deals, right? And it's a whole different ballgame. It's a very different model. I'm always interested in the mindset and those decisions before we get in. I don't want to talk about the model. What had you make that decision? Because, you were doing very fine. You're right. You could have continued doing what you were doing. So what had you say, hey, let's also bring in this deal-driven growth element to it?
Yeah, I think, the very first acquisition we did was towards the end of 2011.
Hmm.
And it was an opportunistic acquisition that, quite frankly, didn't work out.
Hmm.
It was financially a great deal for us, but culturally we swung and missed. And we ended up asking the three largest revenue producers to leave our organization
Wow.
and let them take their clients. So we
Yep.
we paid for them and then gave them away.
Right.
And the I say this often when I'm talking about deals. I mean, I'm so fortunate that that was our first deal,
Mm.
because that made me take a step back and do what we call our non-negotiables in of doing a deal. And that really hasn't changed for us. As I mean, the economics side of this, I mean, are what they are. These aren't complicated business models, and the market dictates value. So spending so much time, effort, and energy on that side before you do the cultural aspect and the evaluation of talent and all of those things is backwards to me. And so really focusing on the individuals inside the business and the depth of the talent is where we spend our time.
Great. So that's the biggest lesson from that first deal. So how long did it take you? I mean, you were licking your wounds for a while or whatever, or how long did it take you to put your toe back into the pool, so to speak, and apply that learning to additional deals?
We did 4 acquisitions in 2012.
Great. Yeah. So you started doing a decent number of deals comparatively early, in this space. And at that point, were you self-funding or had you raised capital? Yeah.
No, we were self-funding.
That's what I
We
thought.
self-funded everything until June of 2021, and we brought in our first private equity partner.
Okay, so let's talk about before the private equity partner in that, I guess it's 9-year, 8-9 year period. How did you come up with the model? And what is the model, right? I don't know if maybe it's evolved. And how did you come up with that? And how did it align with your approach and philosophy? There are so many different models out there.
Yeah, so our model has definitely evolved. So from 2012 through the end of 2018, we had a holding company approach. So we had 20-ish firms that we owned on average 70% of.
Yep.
They kept their brand, kept separate ADV, all of those things. And that was that was a way for us to get started in the acquisition game.
Yep.
But we realized that we weren't getting really any synergy. And it was just, we were sharing 70% of the profits of the firm. And so at the end of 2018, we started a project we referred to as One Mariner, where we bought out the minority owners of north of 20 firms, transitioned to one brand, one ADV, and went from there. So all the acquisitions we've done from 2019 forward have all been full buyouts.
So it's interesting because one of the things I've been talking to the others on this podcast is this somewhat artificial, but useful distinction between aggregator and integrator, right? If you want to pick some language, and if you just say, and everybody's probably somewhere along the spectrum, but the concept, like you were much more of an aggregator up till 18 and then became much more of an integrator. So it's really fascinating because you certainly had folks at other firms make their pitch for the more aggregator or the more integrator model. The more aggregator models, well, people maintain their independence, they can keep their brand, et cetera, et cetera. Integrated model, create more enterprise value, one culture, bring it all in, all these other things. So you made that switch. So I'd love to delve into that a little more for you on what you learned on the more aggregator side, why you made the switch, and now obviously you have a more integrator model. That's what you're looking to bring people into. So talk to us more about that journey of moving from more of the aggregator side to the integrator side.
Yeah, I think from the aggregator perspective, the way I think about it, and there's definitely a place for the aggregator model, but in my view, it's a provider of capital, and there can be other components to it that help lift, each of the individual firms. But at the end of the day, that collection of firms, each individual one of them is still making decisions for their fiefdom and not making decisions for the greater organization. And that component by itself is really what drove me to make the change.
Got it. Okay. So one of the things that I've learned in my 35 years of doing this is that, and I preach to actually my clients who are buyers at whatever rung, is that one of the benefits of building a clear model, right, and having a clear positioning in the industry is not only that you draw the people who are attracted to that model, but also you actually repel the people who are not, right? And you don't waste time, right? So somebody now who really is set on having more control, keeping their own brand, having their own ADV, right? It's clear they're not a right fit for the current model or since 2018 model of Marinate, and you don't waste time with them. But there are a lot of folks who sort of trying to figure out that decision. Like some people have the clear view on one or the other, but some are just trying to figure it out. And they do have concerns. Maybe they're open to a more integrated model, but they have concerns about losing control, losing branding. Maybe they have, G2, who maybe the senior folks are more open to it, but the G2 has an idea that they can continue to build their brand, they're more runway. So how do you address, I mean, you're not going to spend time with the people who are clearly have made that decision, but people are sort of on the fence trying to figure out, how do you sort of address those concerns that come, especially when you're buying an independent RA firm where the person's been an entrepreneur, right? And they've been the king or queen or king of queens. And that's always a concern when that level of control and identity that they, may have to give up.
Yeah, and you can imagine, I do have this conversation a lot, and this I apologize if this answer gets lengthy, but I mean there's some key components to it.
Sure.
And we start from the perspective, and you alluded to this, but I mean this is an extremely fragmented space, and the typical RIA owner started the business because they wanted to serve clients and they're good at it, so they grow. And then they wake up one day and they're dealing with compliance, technology, HR, all the stuff, all the noise,
Yep.
And it takes them away from the client. So we stand back and have the conversation of, what do you want to do? What's your unique ability? Where do you want to spend your time?
Yep.
And, when and if they say, I want to spend my time with clients, we take them through, what we used to call our advisor-centric model, and now we call it our advisor attraction model. And, it has three components. And, the first component of it is we surround them with tools and resources that elevate their value proposition and the client experience.
Yep.
So in-house tax, we own our own trust company, insurance general agency, have a boutique investment bank for clients that are closely held business owners. We have a dedicated retirement team, practice management team, 50 people on our investment team, all these people that are just serving the advisor to serve the client.
Yeah.
The second leg of the stool is I believe in feeding our advisors. So, 16 years, we've never not grown organically at north of 15%.
Wow.
And we want our advisors to be strong point of sale, to be able to explain the value prop in the client experience. But the most difficult part of business development is filling the funnel. So we believe the filling of the funnel is an enterprise priority, and we work to filling the funnel for them. And the last part I've already alluded to is we just call it removing the noise. So taking all that back office stuff. And this kind of goes to your point of the founders or the teams losing their identity and losing they're running the show. We refer to it as front stage, backstage. So you think about being on stage. There's in front of the curtain and behind the curtain. We want to take everything behind the curtain so they get to spend all their time in front of the curtain, which touches the client. And we diligence their value prop and their client experience. And assuming we want our brand on it, we don't mess with it. We take those tools and resources that I mentioned and surround them with it to fill in the gaps. But they get to pick and choose if they're going to bring in the tax services, if they're going to bring in the trust company. That stuff's not mandated.
Got it. Love it. Yeah. I mean, because obviously that's one of the reasons why I wanted to show this broad range is because they're a different fit for different people. And, but like I said, yeah, like you said, I'm sure you deal with that question and that concern a lot. Right. All right. So let's talk about the model itself in terms of, so now you're doing 100% acquisitions, you're bringing people into one brand, one ADV, all that kind of stuff. What does the model look like? Combination of cash and equity? Talk to us about what that looks like.
Yeah, so typically it's a combination. Our typical way of thinking about things is we will make an all cash offer with the ability for the seller to choose up to 30% of the value in the form of Mariner equity. And, it's not it's not a 70-30 deal. It's the ability to choose up to that. And so we put that decision back on them on what exactly they're looking for. And, we used to say all the time, that I didn't want to be someone's retirement plan, right? I didn't want them to sell and not want to work.
Yep.
Now we think about it a little bit differently. Our acquisition strategy is a talent acquisition strategy. And, if there is strong G2, G3, I'm all for cashing out that owner and providing the next generation the support and resources, for them to continue to do great things.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So there's two things that I really like in that. One is, and people have heard me say this on other episodes of the series, even when it is a 70-30 deal or an 80-20 deal somewhere else, I always encourage my clients to look at those two components separately. And the way you express it is even more aligned with that, because I say to them, listen, you're really doing two deals here. One is that you're selling your firm for X amount of cash. And you should, even if it is a forced, let's say 70-30, 80-20 deal, you should look at it in my mind that you're getting 100% of that in cash. And then you're making an investment decision, right, into your buyer. And that investment decision should be separately due diligence and thought about. And would you make that investment? I mean, unless you're happy with the cash portion you're getting and you look at the equity as gravy, which is not usually the case. I mean, you're making an investment decision. Would you invest in Mariner, for example, and how much would you want to, invest in it? And so I love the fact that you divide those, because it really supports that my argument that the client should be looking at it as two related transactions anyway, but two transactions where there's separate business decisions on them.
And you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly why we structured the way we do. Is we want the wanted buy-in.
Yeah.
We don't want it to be a forced buy-in.
So let's talk about G2, because it's always interesting with G2 and G3, especially in this industry where unfortunately the industry has done a poor job, very poor job of attracting talent and developing talent, at a lot of levels, which has always sort of blown my mind because it's such a great industry, right? For me as a lawyer, I could really see it. I mean, obviously I've spent so much time in this industry, but I look at it and there's a lot of parallels, right? Where we both provide very high level advice to quality clients, that is in significant matters in their life and whatever. But you guys have a way better model than we do, right? I mean, every lawyer I'm not complaining. I do very well. I'm fine. But the point is, business model wise, let's see, recurring revenue, paid quarterly, in advance, pulled automatically out of an account. I mean, pretty good business model, great clients to deal with, sophisticated and challenging work. I can go on and on and on. It's been amazing to me, the inability of this industry to develop that G2 and G3 talent generally. And it's no surprise to me that that's a big factor if you have that talent. But talk about your development, because it's a different pitch to G2 and G3 often than the founders, right? In terms of a deal, and too often, and we have a deal with structuring around, we'll get it done now, especially if G2 and G3 have not been equitized or otherwise, taken care of. We've got one now where the founder controls 40% of the book of the revenue, and is looking to end up with 85% of the, equity wise would end up with 85% of the purchase price, right? So talk to us a little bit about G2 and G3 generally and how you deal with that, and also maybe how you overcome some of those issues that may arise in the structuring of the selling firm and how they've treated G2, G3.
Yeah, so a lot of the way we think about it is the G2 and the G3, giving them opportunities to grow. And growth does that. Growth of the overall organization does that. So, whether we're bringing in clients as fast as we are organically, whether we're growing from the standpoint of locations and all of those things, I mean, there's opportunities for the next gen to participate in that growth, both, personally, professionally, and financially. And seeing the track record that we have of doing that, I think, the average age in the industry is, mid 50s, whatever it is. The average age of advisors at Mariner is 40.
That's
and
amazing.
So, when you really take a step back and think about that and all the acquisitions we've done, it's because of that next gen and attracting that next gen, and surrounding them with the tools and resources, having a practice management team that trains and develops, and then feeding them.
Yeah. Yeah, and that that 15%. I mean, listen, for folks that know the industry, know that at least 15% year-over-year growth that you've had is phenomenal in the industry, and obviously that solves a lot of issues because sometimes one of the things that G2 and G3 is often looking at is, well, I'm early in a stage of my career, I'm still hungry, I'm aggressive, whatever. Can I grow faster on my own, right? And frankly, compared to some firms, if a firm's growing at 2.8%, maybe they very well can. But if you're growing at 15, 20, whatever percent, it's a different analysis. So, I always make a distinction between organic growth and deal-driven growth, and we focus on deal-driven growth. But the organic growth rates you have are definitely, I'm sure, a positive attractor especially for G2 and G3 because it creates much more opportunity for them, right?
Yeah, we think it is definitely, and we have a stat that I don't have this in front of me, but for all the acquisitions that we've done from 2012 through 2020, we acquired somewhere in the neighborhood of 105, 110 advisors. Mm-hmm. Just those locations now, just those locations is north of 300 advisors. So to be able to say, we're making this acquisition, we're putting a stake in the ground. This is now our Mariner location. We're going to grow it organically. We're going to grow it by recruiting. We're going to go find talent to bring in, and that again, growth drives growth.
Yeah, love that. I mean, that's a big factor. So you said you brought in over 100. So how many M&A deals has Mariner done over the years? Roughly?
Call it 50. We've done 26 in the last 18 months.
Wow.
So it might actually be north of 50 now.
Okay. So let's talk about that. So obviously you started relatively early in this industry doing deals, right? 2011, 2012, as a time, I mean, we have a lot of listeners that are in the space, but we have plenty of listeners who are out. So just for those listeners who know, and there was a time, I mean, just 10 or 15 years ago, certainly 15 years ago, there was almost, I mean, forget PE money. There was barely even lending money and capital in this space, right? It's amazing the evolution, right? So doing deals going back 11, 12 years ago, I mean, you said you self-funded those deals. I'm not surprised because, there weren't a lot of options, but you've certainly accelerated significantly. And I'm assuming that ties into, right, when you raised the capital. So let's talk about that capital raising decision and that decision, because we talked a little bit about that mindset of moving from your organic growth to just deciding to do deals. But now it's another decision. Okay, we're going to take in outside capital. We've been able to do a really good job, not only with organic growth, but also with deal-driven growth on our own. But now we're going to take in capital and we're going to really step up the pace. So talk to us a little bit about that decision and then who you brought in and, and how that's worked. It's obviously worked out. You've accelerated your deals, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the way it kind of happened is, doing, anywhere between 2 to 4 deals a year for 2 to 3 years. And then we take a break. Yep. And we take a break and integrate and do all that stuff. But really we're taking a break to build our capital base back up again so that then we could do it over and over again. And, the being an opportunist and understanding what was going on in our industry and in the marketplace and seeing and understanding the flow, I knew I needed help to go and bring someone from the outside in that could help fuel that and, do it from the perspective of, we chose Leonard Green Partners out of LA. Sure. And, and as you can imagine, we had a lot of opportunities for others, but we chose them mainly from the fact is they predominantly back founder-led firms and let those founders do what they do. And that's been 100% of our experience with them. And so, they gave us they give us the support we need and the things that we needed in, the capital piece of it, but, raising public debt for the first time. I mean, I needed them for that. So those types of things has been very helpful for us.
Great. So, all right. So you raise that capital and then talk about how you deployed that capital. I mean, obviously you have capital to buy, but doing that many deals, I'm sure you also had to build out more team and things like that, right? I mean, it's a big difference between doing 2-3 deals and integrate them for a year or two, and then doing another 2-3, and then doing as many deals have you done in the last year and a half?
Yeah, up until really June of 2021, our deal team was basically two people, and one of those two people was me.
Right.
And the amount of conversations, the work that needs to get done, all of those things. I mean, you can imagine it's, but our deal team today is 15, 16 individuals.
Yeah.
And, I'm still extremely active in the process. We don't do a deal until I've met the individuals and do the cultural aspect and the value prop and client experience component of it. But, we will talk to more than 100 firms a year. And, that's not a one person's job. So,
Sure.
Building that out had to happen. But that's just kind of the front stage deal team. But then in compliance, HR, operations, technology, there's specific deal related people in each one of those as well that know how to rinse and repeat.
Yeah. Love that. So, it's interesting to me, the evolution that you've had, and I love to see it. I mean, it's really, you can make an argument that Mariner is one of the best examples of a firm that has shown the evolution of the industry, right? Going from, startup RIA to expanding services to, and you guys have really been a leader in that. You've been earlier stage than a lot of folks and who have caught up and figured out, oh, we should have, maybe we should add tax, maybe we should add and firms are doing it now. So one of the things I've always been impressed by you, Marty, about in all the years that we've known each other, and also I've followed Mariner from the outside, is that you've been early in a lot of these processes, whether it's starting to do M&A, all that kind of stuff. Now, though, there's many more competitors, right? And this may tie into a transition where I want to talk about the industry in general. So on the one hand, there are many more competitors. On the other hand, you don't have an issue with getting deal flow, right? So talk about, the evolution of the industry, and, what you see in general about that. I mean, you and I were talking going on the air a little bit that, we both agree that it's come a long way, but we're still very early in its maturation. So talk a little bit about what you see there generally for the industry and what you see for Mariner within that. I mean, there were some articles over the years about, there's going to be this consolidation into a few small firms, and, like everybody's got an opinion on it, but I'd love to, and I didn't buy into a lot of that, but in any case, I'd love to hear what you're seeing in terms of the industry in general and how that affects the future for Mariner.
Yeah, well, I'll start it by saying the boutique firm, couple $100 million under management, or what, in my opinion, those are never going away.
Yeah.
And there's a place for them, there's a need for them, and I think that exists, but that will continue to exist. But there's a lot of people that says Mariner is a large firm. And I always stop them and say, Mariner is a large RIA.
Right.
I mean, we have 1,025 advisors. We have 1,800 total employees. You compare that to Merrill, Morgan, Wells, UBS, who have 17, 15, 12,000 advisors. I mean, we're not a large firm.
Right.
But as I mentioned before, I truly believe this model, the fiduciary model, is far superior than any other model. And do believe there's going to be a handful of RIAs that can compete on an advisor count basis with the wirehouses. And it's a personal mission of mine to try to have Mariner be one of those. And I get asked the question, well, why? And my personal purpose, and therefore Mariners, is to positively impact the lives of many. Start with the client, and then associates, and then communities. And really the best way to do that is to be able to have advisors that can give our quality of advice to as many clients as possible. And it's one thing to focus on getting the individual client one client at a time, but growing your advisor count makes that possible faster.
So let me ask a question on that, and I only ask this because I really know your commitment, right, to the fiduciary model and to the culture you have and that kind of stuff. One of the things that I've often said about the wirehouses is that, first of all, I think in the scope of all the models out there, there's a place for the wirehouse model. I am all for the fiduciary model. I'm all for independence, whatever. But I mean, the wirehouses are going to be there for a long, long time. Right, and there are certain people who belong working there, whatever, right? And even more so, many of the reasons I mean, what I love in this industry is that we have so many positive reasons now for being people, having advisors being pulled toward independence, toward RIAs, but all the negative reasons that they're running from, right? The, the bureaucracy and the compliance and the, and I always say, really out of what everybody calls compliance, 10% of it is true compliance, meaning legal compliance. The rest of it is risk management, right? I understand their model. People get frustrated, they tell us we can't do this. They tell us we can't do this. My argument often for the wirehouses is that, listen, at some size, they've got to almost, rule down to the lowest common denominator, right? Because you run in all these people, you run into having too many people, having too much discretion can run you into trouble, right? So it's not unusual for bigger companies to have. So as you continue to grow with your level of commitment to service the clients, to the fiduciary model, to the culture you have at Mariner, how do you maintain that as you scale in the way that you want to?
It's something that we think about on a day-to-day basis. I mean, even getting to, north of 1,000 advisors, maintaining that is a full-time job. I think about it from the perspective of, culture is top down, policing it is bottom up. And so, making sure that people know and understand they not only have the right, they have the responsibility to raise their hand when something's not matching the culture that they know the organization and myself wants. I also think about it from the perspective of, coming from the wirehouse side of the world, we used to position ourselves as the quarterback of the relationship. And then we would go find third-party, tax, third-party legal services, third-party investment, whatever it was, right? But, I really believe that, the trick or the secret sauce for us is all these components, it's integrated. So, the culture of the tax team is the same culture as the wealth team. Yeah. And each of the components, they don't have their own client base. Their client base is the advisor's client base. And so, everyone's working for the same thing. And I mean, I do think that's the secret sauce.
Yeah, love that. So, Marty, before I ask you my final two questions, is there anything else, whether it's about what you're seeing in the industry or about Mariner and your model and your value proposition out to advisors that you want to share?
Yeah, I think just from the industry perspective, the pace of acquisitions may slow down a little bit because of what's going on in the market. But even if it does, I think that's short term. Yeah. And I think that it reaccelerates again if it indeed does slow down. I mean, just looking at our deal flow, and it's a small industry, so all the CEOs know all the CEOs. Either nobody's deal flow is slowing down, or no one's admitting it.
Right. Right.
I'm not sure which it is yet, but so we'll see how all that plays out. But I think the interesting component, and that we all know how fragmented this industry is, and 15,000 firms. We're not declining. The number of firms is still going up year after year, yep, even though all these acquisitions are happening. And so, I mean, I think that others are starting to understand what this space is about and the attractiveness of it. And, I think that we're still extremely early.
Yeah. And, as in a little quick pre-conversation we have, I totally agree. And we see it as well, because we do a lot on the breakaway side as well, in addition to the deal side. So we see both sides of it. And of course, I mean, my firm we handle a lot. We've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of breakaways. So but we're still just a microcosm, but in our own volume, but also in the industry statistics, which are more important. Yeah, I mean, from the point of view of, hey, there are more aggregators, integrators, buyers, whatever, that are bigger and bigger, there's consolidation. But as far as the overall industry, there's actually not, because it's exactly what you said. There are more firms every year, despite how many are being bought up, because of the strong breakaway movement, which continues. So right. Yeah, I think we got a lot of years to still have some fun.
Yeah, we do.
All right. So
it's
Marty,
a good thing we're so young.
Exactly. Listen, you and I could talk for hours and hours about deals, but we won't. So we got to bring this to a close. So before I ask you my final question, if people want to find out more about Mariner, what's the best place for them to get more?
MarinerWealth.com or joinmariner.com.
Perfect. So, Marty, my final question on the podcast is about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom from oppression from all people in the world to why I've been an entrepreneur and I've had a boss in 30-something years. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
I think for me, I bring it back to what I mentioned my purpose statement was, and that's to positively impact the lives of many. And I think the freedom to be able to do that and to focus on that and see the ripple effect that has. I mean, you can focus on one individual at a time, but then watching how that just branches out from there. I mean, that's why I get up in the morning.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I so align with that, Marty. It's a beautiful time in life when you get to the place where you're driving motivated. It could be more about service and impact than anything personal. It just makes everything sweet.
Yep.
Good stuff. Marty Bicknell, thanks for being such a great guest on the DealQuest podcast and on this special series we're doing on the RIA integrators and aggregators.